and welcome to the Journey to CEO Success podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Saunders, and I'd like to welcome Patrick Thean, the strategy execution expert and author of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Journey to CEO Success. Hello, Patrick.
Hey, Melissa. Good to see you today. How are
Yeah,
you?
you too. You too. You staying warm? I know it's nice and cold out there.
It's a cold day in Charlotte today. Very cold.
Yes, it is. Patrick, in our last podcast, we were talking about the ways CEOs can build a strong people ecosystem. And we felt, man, this topic is so juicy. We thought we would spend another episode today chatting about it as well. And I wanted to bring those up to speed who may not have joined us previously. So, if you don't mind, can you walk us through how you know if your
Sure.
people are doing well in your organization?
Yeah. So this is a large chapter in this book. This
It
part
is.
is on the people ecosystem, and so last episode we actually talked a little bit about this 4 quadrant chart that we're showing here, and I borrowed this concept from Jack Welch, and it's basically you take a look at your folks or people that work for you, and you kind of measure them on 2 axes on results that are being produced and their
Right.
behavior. Are they behaving in the way that demonstrates your values well? So in the A box over there, person's delivering strong results and has the right behavior, strong
Mhm.
values. And then the
Yeah.
B box is, good, not so good results, but the person is behaving well. You enjoy working with that person, and it may be that person I call that, is probably the right person on the bus, and maybe in the wrong seat, or it may be someone that just needs more training. And then
Okay.
after that, you've got your C players, which is poor results, poor values. Like, why are you even here? We should get rid of folks like that. They don't belong here. And then finally, the worst box really is the D box, where the person has strong results but behaves poorly. The reason why it's the worst box is because most companies I've visited tend to keep their D players because they're producing results. But unfortunately, D players in that box are producing results at a cost to your organization. It's killing your culture, and
Mm,
so you're always tempted to tolerate that behavior
sure.
because they're giving you great results. But I got to tell you, you can go faster for a short amount of time with a D player, but you go much further with a great team. So it takes time for someone to actually make that decision. They tolerate it until they can no longer tolerate it, and then they go, "Okay, I'm done." And usually, when I see a D player exit the team, what amazingly happens is that the whole team performs better. It's hard to have the faith that that will happen, and that's why a lot of leaders don't act as quickly as they should. But if you think about it, if you're watching this podcast, if you think about it, the folks that you've asked to leave, um, I think most of the people around you thank you, right? They don't
Oh,
go,
yeah.
"Wow, I can't believe you fired that guy." They tend to thank you, and they sometimes even ask you, "Why did it take you so long?"
Yeah, yeah. I'm assuming those in the C quadrant, those are the pretty easy ones to kind of let go because they're not performing and they're not a good cultural fit. Where I can see the D people, man, it is hard. It's hard to get rid of the
Yeah,
sales guy who's, who's producing more and more. I mean, how do you
yeah.
feel that in there?
It's hard, even the C quadrant, it's hard because nobody likes to fire somebody.
Yeah, right.
Nobody likes to do that. So it's hard, and I know it's hard because I've had to do it, and in my younger days, I took a lot longer to do it. Even actually, frankly, even today, I take a lot longer to do it because we're all human.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how can we all develop companies that we have people in only that A quadrant?
I know, right? It's really difficult. It's really difficult. But let's talk about how to do that. So, so we broke this into 2 podcasts because we realized last time we didn't have enough time to talk about the importance of renewing the right organization.
Yeah, right.
Right? And so for this podcast, we're going to actually talk about the importance of renewing your organization as well as other people in the ecosystem. Because when I say people ecosystem, I don't just mean your employees. I mean the other people in your ecosystem, like investors and board members and coaches, folks that can help you.
Okay. Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah. So let's talk about the importance of renewing and keeping the right organization around you. I think what people don't realize is that growth companies change very quickly. I mean, imagine if you're growing at north of 20% a year. In about 3+ years, you would have doubled your company. So I want you to imagine that, if you're a $5 million company, you'd be
Yeah.
a 10. If you're a $10 million company, you'd be a 20. I mean, you would have doubled your company. So what happens is that things begin to break. Processes that used to work, you outgrow them. And
Yeah.
then
Right.
the roles change. I mean,
Mm.
the responsibilities that you have will grow. You will just automatically take on more responsibilities, whether you want to or not. So, existing roles that your people are in, they grow in responsibility and scope. Hey, by the way, have you heard of the phrase, you promote someone to the level of incompetence?
Oh, I definitely. I've seen it in action a couple of times. I think, it's like you don't want to let those people who do a lot go, and so you want to hold on to them, and so you almost promote
You
people who
promote
aren't
them.
as good as
Yeah.
they are.
And what happens is that when a company grows like that, I think people reach the level of incompetence quicker without even realizing it. And so, imagine if you were doing five things well, and now suddenly you've been asked to do 10 things, of which
Right.
maybe three or four of those 10 things you don't know how to do. So unfortunately, if you're not careful, great people, those people that are performing in that A box over there, can easily sink down to the B box. Think about it,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because their responsibilities grew, they got overloaded, they started wearing many hats. So change is scary, but I want to encourage everybody that growth does bring change, but change actually brings opportunity. So I want to encourage all the leaders listening to this to be proactive, and on an annual basis, if you're growing, work on your organization for tomorrow. So here's how that works.
Yeah.
You want to envision, as your company grows, what the organization looks like. You want to think about each role and how the skills may change, what are the new responsibilities, and then you want to prepare your people for that. So how do you prepare your people for that? Is you discuss with them the roles that they have today, and you show them the possibilities and potential for tomorrow, and you ask them which roles they would actually like. Now this
Hmm.
breaks some thinking. So most of us automatically think that, hey, if I'm in operations, my next step should be a growth in operations, and ultimately I want to become your chief operating officer, something like that. Doesn't have to be that way. When a company grows like that, it opens up wonderful new opportunities, and you might consider new possibilities in other roles in the company. So both the leader or the president or CEO needs to be open, because sometimes we're not open. Sometimes we don't want that person who's doing great in
Mm.
that particular role
Yeah,
to
that
do
makes sense.
something else, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that I've seen CEOs make two mistakes very common. One is that we overwork people that we trust. So we have a new responsibility, we automatically give it to that person. We don't think about whether or not that person has the right skill.
Huh.
The training, is there a skill gap?
Right.
So that's one. And the second mistake we make is that as people begin to take on too many responsibilities and go from A quadrant to B quadrant, we begin to think that that person is no longer an A player, but actually that person is still great. It's just that we've overloaded them. So the two mistakes is we allow people to get overloaded, and therefore they stop becoming an A player. Secondly, we are not aware enough of helping them grow their skill. So as the job expands, so does the gap of their skill set to the current job.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
want to encourage all of us to view that as growth opportunities. So, Michael Prager said to me, "Hey, Patrick, if my company's growing at north of 20%, I better be growing at north of 20%, or the company will outgrow me." Now, Michael knows what he's talking about because he took Avid Exchange from zero to today. It's a public company on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange and doing very well. So he's had to renew himself and his people all the time. By the way, one thing unique about Avid Exchange and Michael Prager too is this executive team, what he calls his governance team, has been with him for north of 5, 6 years. I mean, it's a long time
That's
for
great.
the team to be together. So why Michael has been able to do that is he has always helped his people grow in skill as the company grows. So if you get scared and don't tackle that, it's going to tackle you. So instead, I want to encourage all leaders to be proactive, work on what the organization looks like for tomorrow, envision what that new organization should look like, and then prepare your people for that. So, when I've been working with Mike all these years, on an annual basis, he
That's
did that often on an annual basis as the company was growing at 20, 30, 40%. And he would discover future roles. I'll give you one quick story. Once he was worried about his chief technology officer, because the job was getting too big, and I suggested to Michael, as his coach, that he work with his CTO and have this discussion about the future org. And so at first he was a bit afraid, but he did it. And this really encouraged him to do this with other people. He discussed the future roles. And in doing so, he learned about what were the things that his chief technology officer did not enjoy as the role expanded. And so he was then able to craft a new role and hire someone to do the work that that person did not enjoy. This
yeah.
allowed his CTO to maintain the work that he actually did enjoy, get stronger, better, more focused.
Hmm.
Truly a win-win-win. A win for the CTO because he got to enjoy his job more. A win for Michael because he was scared and he actually helped his CTO do better. And a win for the company because the CTO became a better CTO.
Yeah, no, that
It's a
makes
simple win.
sense.
Yeah.
Do you think, could you say it, do it on an annual basis? Is this something that you would sort of scoop into, like maybe during annual planning? Like, how do you get in a cadence to remind yourself as a
Yeah.
leader, I really need to take some time and examine our current situation and what we want to look like in 3 or 5 years?
So I think that this is something that you do. So how often you do it depends on how fast you're growing.
Okay.
Some of the companies that I've worked with that were growing north of 50%, or maybe even 100% in their early days, they had to do it every 6 months.
That makes sense.
So the problem is that as your responsibilities grow, the simple question is, well, number one, how did the role change, right?
Hmm.
Number two is, what are the new skills that are needed, and do you have them? If you don't have them, then as a leader, I need to help you get them. And so, as the faster the company grows, the faster those roles expand, and therefore, the more often you have to do this. I would say if you're growing at 20% a year, I would say reviewing it every 12 months to even 18 months, if you have a mature team, is probably good enough. But if you're growing faster than that, if you're growing at 50, 60% a year, hyper growth type companies, you want to review it every half a year.
And Patrick, I know we've gotten a lot of feedback from people who are reading your book who aren't CEOs, but who aspire to be that one day. And I was just wondering, is this something, if for those people who might be joining our podcast, if you sort of see yourself slack kind of becoming a B player, is this something to be proactive to your leader about? Do you bring this to their attention and then maybe openly discuss it? How do you, if you recognize that as you're falling into the B quadrant, how can you, as sort of the, if you're not the CEO?
Yeah. Yeah, I would suggest that we don't even wait till we fall into the B quadrant. Like
Okay.
we all know how we're doing,
Yeah.
So I think this is what I call the owner versus the victim mentality. I
Uh-huh.
think that we should all own our own careers and our own progress. We shouldn't have to wait. Like the best players don't wait for someone to say to them, "Hey, you're not performing as well," right? The best players know when they are not performing as well,
Hmm.
and begin to. And I would encourage you not to be scared, but to, you know, be an owner over your own capabilities and kind of go talk to your team about, talk to your boss about it, talk to your leader
Mhm.
about it. So
Mhm.
yes, I would say that you know it is hard to do that and it's scary, and that's why if you have a great leader that you're working for, it
Mhm.
should not be scary because a good leader should be there to help you maximize the
So,
potential that you have. And if you don't have a leader like that, I know this is probably sounds weird for me to say this, but if you don't have a leader like that, I encourage you to go find yourself a new leader because you own your life. And
mhm.
so, why would you want to work for somebody that doesn't care about your growth? I
Yeah,
wouldn't.
yeah,
So,
no, I
if you
think.
have a, if you have a poor leader, and by the way, the best people on our team, unfortunately or fortunately, they do that. Like,
Mhm.
like people don't work for bozos for too long. If they have confidence in their own capabilities, they go look for something new.
That's right. That's right. Huh. Well, and I think, during our last podcast, you talked about a little bit about that, how if you are an A player and you allow those D players to hang around too long, how those A players will actually kind of check out and go
That's
work for
right.
somewhere else because they are A players. They don't have
Yeah.
to work there. So, you talk about how proactive Michael was. How though not every CEO is like Mike. So, what are the stumbling blocks that CEOs might encounter when they try to look at their ecosystem, their people ecosystem?
Well, I'll tell you the number one biggest stumbling block I've seen is that people are afraid to do this. And so people always tell me that they have a great team.
Hmm.
And I'd say, well, first, I'd like you to realize that a great team today that you don't continue to work on and refine will become a mediocre team tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of my favorite teams in the NFL is the San Francisco 49ers.
Boo.
Last year, they went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
This year, due to injuries and other things, they didn't even make the playoffs. I'm sad. Okay. How, and so my point is that they were a great team last year.
Mm.
Now this year, they've done everything they can, and some of the injuries and issues they had were beyond the capabilities of the coach and stuff. Because I do believe they have a great coach as well. However, my only point is that they're not a great team this year. And I
Mm-hmm.
can make excuses for them because I'm a fan, right? I'll
Right.
say, oh, they had injuries, they had this, they had that.
Yeah,
But
they're a great team.
yeah, but they're not a great team this year. They're not
Mhm.
functioning as a great team this year. And so people always tell me they have a great team, which is good. But that doesn't mean your great team today is going to be a great team tomorrow. You've got to not get defensive about your teams. So before you say I have a great team, because that is the number one stumbling block, you should ask yourself, how do I maintain a great team? I would use the continuation tense, not the past
Present.
tense or the present tense, right?
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
so don't get defensive about your team. Instead get curious. Get curious about the possibilities. When you work on the future organization, it opens up opportunities for your great team for growth and career advancement. So I think in one of our previous podcasts, we talked about being curious, and I said
Yeah,
that you should replace fear with curiosity.
that's right.
Same thing here. We are usually afraid to examine our teams because we're afraid of what we'll find.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I want you to get excited. I want you to get curious and think about the possibilities. I think this opens up wonderful possibilities for growth and advancement. Now, growth and advancement happens if your company's growing. If your company's not growing, then there is really no growth and advancement. So you got to get your company to grow, and then
Yeah.
you have growth and advancement for your people.
Whew. CEOs have tough jobs, huh?
Absolutely. My mom said to me once, if it were that easy, they wouldn't need you.
That's true. It just run itself.
That's right. So, yeah, you got a tough job, but you've got to. The whys really motivate me.
Hmm.
The whys really motivate me. And so, what are the whys that motivate me as a CEO? Well, the people around me really decide whether or not I love my job, frankly. So,
Get
if
that.
I do a good job of making the place great for the folks that work for me, giving them a great future, they'll have more joy coming to work, and so will I.
Mm-hmm.
uh, there'll be more collaboration, people will be more engaged, you get better results. And you notice I talk about results
I do.
last, because I do believe that when you take care of the team around you, build their skills, then the results should get accomplished. uh, because if you build a great company, results is a natural outcome. So, I mean, have you ever seen a great company full of unhappy people led by people they dislike and don't respect?
No.
No, right? Yeah,
No, very rarely. I don't think that'll happen. People will either leave, the company won't grow, it'll go
right.
bust. Yeah, I mean, it sort of dictates what happens to the company. Earlier you talked about how the ecosystem expands to not only your team, but investors and board members. And, I think that's an interesting approach because I think sometimes it's easy to sort of just get so internally focused that you forget to take a little bit broader of approach. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the rest of the ecosystem. So you've got people ecosystem, I should say. So you got your investors, you got your board members, you got suppliers, and then you've got customers. So I want to spend a bit more time on, and then you got coaches to help you, by the way. So investors, board members, and advisors or coaches. Those are the three categories I would spend a bit of time on. I think a lot of folks sometimes don't realize that investors and board members can really be the right ones, really help you grow your company. So some entrepreneurs are not matured enough to view investors as positive. Sometimes we make the mistake of viewing them as just the money people, a
Sure.
necessary evil to grow our business. But I tell you, they're not just money people. They bring relationships, they bring advice. And if you pick the right ones that are open to helping you, not just making money off of you, so then you have a wonderful people ecosystem.
Mhm.
I think Michael was very strategic, and I documented this in the book. If you go to page 174 in the book, talks about how some of the investors Michael had in his company. But I do recall when Bain Capital invested in Avid Exchange and Michael Prager years ago. And Michael and I discussed how to actually maximize that participation. And I suggested that he get on a weekly call, like a weekly rhythm, with Matt Harris, who was the lead investor from Bain Capital. And so Michael did that every Sunday night, 9 p.m. He got on a call with Matt Harris, and Matt was gracious to give him that kind of time.
Mm.
He's done it for years, by the way. And Michael learned so much and has gotten so much great advice from Matt Harris. It has been and continues to be a wonderful relationship beyond the money. And that's kind of what you want. Like I said, a good investor, if you understand how to use your board well, it can really
Mhm.
be an asset to you, and surrounding yourself in the ecosystem of the right people like that is really important, I think.
Yeah, man, I guess it's really hard though for CEOs to have enough self-reflection sometimes to sort of realize this. Is that when they reach out to coaches? Is that when they need the coach's help?
Yeah, it is a trend. It is a trend
Yeah.
that CEOs are realizing it is no longer weak to ask for help.
Mm.
And I don't know why a lot of CEOs still think that way. I mean, I
Yeah.
think I reached out and got my first coach back in 1995 or 96 when Richard Jordanella came to help me. At that time, coaching wasn't a trend, and I didn't even know that was a coach. But I reached out and got my help. And I think we need to realize a few things. I mean, the best athletes in the world have coaches. They have multiple coaches.
Definitely.
Um, Steve Jobs had a coach. So if the great Steve Jobs had a coach, why don't you think you need a coach? Why do
Right.
you think you're so self-sufficient? Why do you think it's weak if you don't have a coach? I think, unfortunately, you don't know what you don't know. So
That's true.
yeah, this book contains a lot of reflection and wisdom from my time coaching Michael Prager and other CEOs. But I tell you about Mike, I think I'm inspired. I want to be like Mike, frankly, and
I
and
think I've heard
so
that before.
it's amazing. But one thing about Michael that has really helped him is that starting his company back in 2000 and making his quarters every year after he went public in 2021. That's really inspiring. And one thing he does is he starts with who. In other words, when he has a business problem to solve, he actually starts with who. He asks himself, like, who can help me? Who can help me? So Michael actually has multiple coaches for different things.
Oh,
So
that's
like
interesting.
like when he started, when the company went public, he realized that he had to do small speeches at conferences, investor conferences, and things like that. And so he went out and hired for himself a speaking coach, a speech coach. And so there is power in asking not the how and the why question, but also asking the who question. Not just for as a generic coach for yourself, but also to solve problems that you don't fully understand how to solve.
Yeah, you keep mentioning Michael, but in the book you talk about Bob Potter. He has a pretty interesting story too.
Yeah, yeah. Bob Potter is a very interesting guy. He was running Century One when I met him. So he was the CEO of Century One, and Century One was very successful in the during the COVID-19 time. it was sold to SolarWinds in, I think it was 2020 or 2021. His story's in the book anyway. So he, when he met me, he said, Patrick, this is my last gig, my last CEO gig. He was in his 60s, and he said, this is my
Mhm.
last CEO gig. I want this to be a great gig, and I want to end strong. I want to end with a victory. Can you help me make sure that I succeed? And I said, yes, absolutely. When I coach CEOs, I work really hard to make them succeed. And in fact, I always worry that the CEOs I coach will fail. So I always say, look, I'm here to help you not fail, but rather to succeed. And so, because of our relationship and the conversations we had, you never know when you need somebody. So,
Right.
because you never know when you need somebody, it's really best to get into a coaching relationship, into a rhythm. Because when you need somebody, you can't just wake up and go, who do I call? But when you need
Right.
somebody and you're in a regular rhythm with your coach, that's great. So, I've walked with Bob Potter for a couple of years through many different issues, especially during the COVID-19 issues. And I was already his coach when COVID-19 happened. And so we were able to work on things together. And because of that, he succeeded. His last gig was very successful, and even during COVID-19.
Yeah, how do people like Bob, how do they know when to reach out and how do they find a coach?
So I think most of us make the mistake, and even I made the mistake early in my career, of reaching out when we're in trouble,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So when you are drowning, you know to go look for a life preserver.
Right.
Most of us don't think that we should equip ourselves with a life preserver before we jump into the lake. But that's the mentality I would encourage all of us to have. That it is a different mindset. I would suggest that everybody go find themselves a coach. Like I said, the best athletes in the world have coaches. The best CEOs in the world have coaches. So why don't you think you need one? So I
Mhm.
suggest you be proactive. I think that you find someone that has the right chemistry with you. I think if you, first of all, you got to have the right chemistry. You got to be able to be comfortable, and reflect with your coach, and talk
Mhm.
about things and be vulnerable. You got to be able to do that. So
Right.
if you don't have that ability, then you just have the wrong person you're
Mhm.
working with. So I would say that's the number one thing. And I would share also that some of us make the mistake of thinking that the coach actually has to have done the things that you've done. And
Right,
you don't
right.
really need to find a coach that has done what you have done. You need to find a coach that cares about you, asks us the right questions, listens well, and just helps you to process. It's strange, but oftentimes the answers are within you. You
Mm.
just need to have someone to talk to. And as you hear yourself talk it out, and maybe that person has some of the right patterns that he or she has been through, the right patterns, not necessarily the same experience in your industry,
Yeah, that
but the
makes sense.
right patterns, that could be very, very helpful.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And man, our time is gone again, Patrick. This is such an interesting topic. And I really want to encourage listeners, if they haven't already done so, purchase your book, read this chapter, read all of the chapters. It is available on Amazon. You can see the QR code right on the screen. I can't state it enough. And it's not number one on Amazon, for no reason. This book is being purchased and read by CEOs and other people who want to aspire to be CEOs, and it's chock full of just really great insights like what we've talked about today. And next week we are going to be discussing, as a marketer, one of my favorite topics, core customer. So buy the book. Tune in next week when we talk about that. Until then, I'd like to invite everyone to enjoy their journey. Bye,
Thank
y'all.
you, Melissa. Thank you.
Bye, Patrick. Thank you.